I wanted to make a video about what I believe the basis of a potentially profitable discretionary trading strategy is. I think, as I've said extensively, you need a market-based approach, one that is taking into account the simplest casino napkin math of why a strategy can expect to have edge and how that can inform decision making. Shout out Garrett for the FX replay login. I figured I would record myself doing a walkthrough of the kinds of trades that I like to take, just to see if it, one, increases my focus back testing, and two, for posterity, could serve as a good reference point for what I want my strategy to look like and what my strategy looks like for the uninitiated. So let's see if this works at all. Jumping right into it. This is the open candle here. So I think probably what I'd end up doing is just glance at the daily briefly, just to get an idea for what I'm thinking. This is some random point in the past. There probably is some look ahead bias in the sense that I know that we're generally going up, but I think I would have that expectation anyway, since NASDAQ benefits from those passive inflows, and since we print so much money, we'll probably just go up in a straight line for the foreseeable future anyways. I think the first thing I would look at is that this is kind of acting as the range controller, and I think that that's a good intro to how I'm conceptualizing things more generally. It's typically in terms of what I would call controllers and premiums. So I think generally a range is mostly noise, but you're going to have pieces of that range that are where, I don't know if it's market makers or general market participants, but there's going to be, in a high frequency, high granularity sense, a market is going to be cut up in terms of future immediate fair value or current fair value, which is what an asset is really worth in the immediate moment in the eyes of, the aggregate market participants, and, some variable premium range around that fair value in which market makers are looking to capture spread, and then some are quoting around. And I think that that kind of is a useful framework to think of how a range can simultaneously be noisy. That is, the individual candle movements at some points aren't really indicative of any signal, don't really mean anything, and are simultaneously information bearing in the sense that you're thinking about what price is worth in a given moment and maybe in the next second, the next 10 seconds. And some range that is optimal to quote around that to try to be the person that gets the free trade into that changing fair value ahead of time. So I think that logic kind of also applies at every time frame, but is probably easier to trade or has more edge on the 1 minute, considering you're getting closer to the kind of the physical breaking point of the system, where it's like you're just looking at, it's just an order book. It's not actually fractal. You're actually looking at the orders themselves, which are where all the inefficiencies come from. On the daily, I don't think there's much inefficiency in a market that's this liquid. But either way, this is kind of the thing I would be looking at. Where are we kind of trading at? Like, what is the range, basically? I mean, it's not very conceptually complicated. I don't know if I'd really mark anything on the bottom side, to be honest. If we start to turn around, there'd be things that I'd probably mark out that I would expect us to trade into. We kind of held this low on the backside. We're pushing up aggressively, but we are kind of stalling out here. I'm not really looking to make much inference on the high time frame, in the sense that I'm not kind of saying, oh, this did this, so that must mean this. I'm just kind of looking what is currently happening. Where is the current momentum driving us? I think if this was a 1 minute chart, there's kind of some sort of overlap or sets of overlaps in here. I'd probably be expecting you, if you were trying to push up, to do something like this, and then have one final test into this before pushing like that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I feel like you see that on the 1 minute quite a bit. So if we get below this, we're definitely attacking something in these wicks, or some liquidity internally. So we're kind of between these two. These are our controllers. If we were mid range here, if price could come up a bit and we were here, my idea of fair value, depending on momentum, would be that we're going to either trade here next or we're going to trade here next, right? It's pretty clear, depending on not necessarily bias, but just the noise that's implicit in the fact that we're mid-range. So I might take a trade into this, I might take a trade into this, depending on momentum and internal structure. But yeah, so that's kind of my idea for the daily. I don't really have a clear bias since we're kind of just like, fucking around on this. If we were like here, I'd probably expect us to keep going. I think there's a good chance you keep going. At this point, it's not like something obvious is standing out to me, but I'm probably, a pinch a pinch bullish considering this is an only up asset. But I'd like to see whether or not we're, kind of staying under this or what the situation is there. So probably just jump down to a 15. Take a look at where some highs and lows are internally. You're looking at this on the high end. And you had something of a sweep right there. Just internally, our big cluster is kind of like here. And let me mark this out. And if we get below that, then we can make reference of all that. So does it look like we're holding this? I mean, like maybe. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Most of my trades are going to be super, super micro anyways. We did just sweep all this. This is kind of the bigger low here, so I'm just going to mark that out and see if we're continuing to sweep. In live, I would also be making use of the 15-second chart and ES. It's a bit complicated to do that on FX Replay, so I'm not going to do that here, but I would usually have a bit more information behind some kind of macro bias kind of situation. So grain of salt on that. But at this point, I'm just going to, let open play out and see what we do so I can give a real idea of what I'm doing here. Hello? Okay. So we've swept the low here. We're holding above this. We're pushing up. We're getting that open volatility. I think it's reasonable to trade into these highs today. I think it's reasonable to trade into these lows today. I think the flavor is definitely bullish since we've had this sweep and we're kind of holding above this for now. Immediately, I think what I'm always making reference of is the internal highs and lows. I think a big part of my strategy is to kind of, since I'm trying to quote unquote market make around a current fair value, but not since, but I am trying to market make around a current fair value, but I'm also kind of exposure trading. I'm not trading like a market maker in the sense that I'm taking a couple points off per trade. I'm benefiting from the couple points that I'm given on a good entry and then going break even based on that and then playing the exposure. So the only real profits like kind of ever that I ever get comes from the exposure when the move expands, and the move is more likely to expand in the direction that I'm generally biased towards than not biased towards. So I will kind of take counter trend trades, but I'm kind of only going to quote in direction of, whatever bigger liquidity sweep there was, or especially, when you're holding above a high or a low. If you're sweeping this, I don't know if I'm going to look for shorts necessarily. If I was more bearish, I would. In this case, I'm a little bit bullish, so I'd probably just wait for this to be holding over or for us to get a trade into this if I feel like it's kind of the thing controlling the range, but we'll get into that. So basically what I'm trying to say is I would be waiting for this to specifically be holding over, because then I feel like, everything is in line with the general idea and we're trying to reprice higher. So skip ahead a couple seconds here. I'll just play that actually. So we are sweeping that, but we are holding pretty decisively off that. I'm kind of mixed here because we've had this sweep, but we're also failing this. And I don't really have a decided daily bias. If I was really bullish, I would just say, fuck the sweep. We're probably going to at least trade back into it. I think that that's still possible. This, if I, let's just see the next couple candles actually. You still have that open volatility, so it makes sense that you trade back into that. But I'd like for us to see something a bit more concrete, so I can give an example of the kind of trade I would actually end up taking. So at this point, what I have my eye on is the current range. So I would say this is the current range, at least in its current formation. You can obviously slip this and then you're in something bigger or something just else. But in my head, if I'm like trying to rationalize a long right now, for example, because that's kind of my general bias, you're holding above this, you swept this, and you're struggling against this. These are kind of our controllers, right? This, but really more like this and this externally. And then internally, I'm looking at like what's actually holding. Like you have some sort of, actually there's no real overlap there, but you're kind of between this shit and like this, for example. You got this as well internally. So like what are the controllers internally that are at the premiums of the range? And that just means like either extreme side of the range. If I'm bullish and we're talking about premiums here and you want to call this like the middle of the range, all premium entries are going to be, down here somewhere if I'm bullish. And those are also going to happen to be the most protected entries. If we're up here, I'm not going to knife catch some shit here. But, in my head, I want to get the lowest longs possible if I'm bullish and the highest shorts possible if I'm bearish. Internally, I don't know if I'd love anything here because I don't really consider that to be the low of the range. I don't really consider that to be too premium. If we were really aggressive, I might change that. The way I'm modeling, quote unquote, these ranges is entirely based on the current price action as well. Because it's like, why am I using this, for example, and not this or like this and whatever's down here? It's because that's kind of the discretionary part is how you're modeling the ranges. And I think that's a better way to think about it than I'm trying to predict what price is doing. It's like, no, that's not my job. My job is to model the ranges, because if I model the ranges, then there's a very clear, rigid sense in which I can conceptualize what is a good entry, what is a good trade. And it's the ones that are at the extremes of those, but not only that, and I'll get into this in a sec, but also kind of the internal momentum, which is harder to read on FX Replay. But I'm generally only trying to take trades that have the momentum of the direction that I'm aiming for with them. So I just basically what I'm trying to say is on any time frame, I'm never trying to knife catch anything. That could be even on the 1 minute internally. I don't really want to take anything that's trading into my order, which is kind of counterintuitive because I'm using limits, but there's a way to make it kind of work. So for now, I'm expecting you to like at least test into this overlap, because I think these are kind of the controller points in this noisy range, as well as this. But if you get into that, you'll probably just go through it, or at least try to. And then you've also got kind of this and then this level. So we'll see if you fail off this current overlap or what happens inside of this. So just intra-range noise, kind of just doing whatever. You're testing the controller again, potentially holding off of it. At this point, I would be expecting this to get tested back into, just because it's kind of at the extent of like this range. And I feel like these things just are generally kind of magnets for liquidity. So there is a universe where if I was really bearish, I might try to get tagged into this, or I guess to stop there because that's tiny, or really as high as possible, just because I feel like you trade into the next piece that kind of is 99% going to actually get tested. And then once I'm there, it's a free break even, and I have exposure for the down move. Obviously, I only really want to do that if I'm actually bearish, because if I'm just taking a trade that's basically for sure going to get break even, then I'm taking risk for effectively nothing. But I don't think that's something I would take right now, because you're probably not going to get into this before you get into this. Okay, well, maybe not actually. Let me see. Am I really bullish? Am I really against that? Is there anything else in here that can hold? Does the logic of this needing to get tested really hold up here? I actually do think this isn't something I would hate. The only thing I don't like about it is that I'm not super crazy bearish right now, but we are kind of in the morning where we can shop back and forth between stuff. So I'm actually going to attempt this. I think this is the kind of trade I would take. I don't know if I have the best read right now, since we're doing this back test and not in a live situation. But okay, either way, I didn't get filled. And this is not the kind of trade I would take after this was tested, because the whole trade depended on getting the entry before this trades into, because now I would be break even. So I'm not going to take that trade after I would be break even. And I think this is a good example of the kind of things I mean when I say premium versus fair value. In this moment, my conviction of this getting into this was that this is the immediate fair value. or this is the part of the range that will get tested before this takes this move up if it wants to. In all cases, it's very robust because in all cases, I'm believing that this probably gets traded into regardless. And this is kind of more or less at the high of this range, especially at the high of this range, right? If I'm expecting this to at least get traded into, and then you get exposure into something down here, and ideally further if you're properly have bias in that direction. So it's not super robust, but no market making modeling really is either. I mean, it's all crude statistical estimation of what the next fair value is. And so this is just the discretionary way of doing that. But it's important that I'm thinking of things in terms of I'm getting a sell for more than this thing is about to be worth, which is given by this. Again, it's kind of hand wavy because it's discretionary, but you'll notice these patterns and you'll be able to, or at least I notice these patterns, and I feel like those are the things that govern my decision making. So at this point, it doesn't even really matter whether I'm bearish or not. That just kind of dictates whether or not I'm going to be break even or in profits. But it's more about the entry being free in and of itself. And then if I'm generally right on bias, then that's a different story. Right now, we're at the low of the range again. If I was modeling the range more like, oh, we're really aggressive, so I'm going to call this the range instead of this the range, then obviously you can take shorts like here, because now that's premium to whatever you're modeling the current range to be. So it all depends on the aggression of the market. Right now, I'm still kind of looking at this, and I'm still kind of vaguely bullish. If we slip under all this, then I probably won't be anymore, particularly under this low. If we're starting to actually hold under that, I feel like this volume balance probably gets tested. Those things, again, tend to be magnets. But for now, I don't really love shorts in this immediate moment. I would wait for like 2 more candles here, just because I feel like you're at the low of the range, right? This is, lower in the current thing that I'm calling the range. So let's see if we get a couple more candles and we can change what I'm calling the range. Let's see. I wouldn't even hate longs right here, to be honest, just based on where we're at in the range. Now that you're pushing up, you're kind of failing off the high shit. You kind of tested the low of this overlap right here. I'd be curious to see what we do here. We're kind of trying to slip a little bit. Yeah, so it looks like we'll probably get into that volume balance down there. And it looks like today might actually be kind of bearish. You swept this and you're failing under this. You've tested this a dozen times or whatever, and you got a bunch of liquidity below. So right now, I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm just going to look to see, are we actually holding under shit that is the extent of other ranges? So if this was the low of the previous range, and the logic doesn't exactly work like this, but it's really, I'm generally just looking like, are we holding under lows, holding above highs? But if this is the previous range and we're holding under the low of that range, then we're obviously in a new range, right? So kind of just simple logic there. So we're in that volume balance, and if we're going to continue to be in failure, we're probably going to hold under that low, right? So let's see if we're holding under that daily and all that shit. This is still right off open, so this can obviously still be very volatile and swing around a lot. Usually I'd also be looking to see if the 15-second was holding, under these things. If the market's more aggressive, usually that can be enough. You just need price to actually reject the level. But yeah, it's going to depend on the rejection. So now the new range could look something like this. If we form a high around here, I take it we tested this overlap in here. Yeah, we tested the low of that. So I'd be curious, if I believe that now this, this is a relevant controller, maybe this overlap, would like to get tested before we take a move up if we do, or even this, but that's kind of already got tested here, so it's not super necessary, or this is controlling, you know what I mean? I might look to take a trade like right here into this, just because I feel like this needs to get tested. In that moment, I don't really actually believe that necessarily. And this is a bit greedy, considering if like this is your range here, then this is a bit low, in terms of where this thing could possibly come up to. So really the best trades for me are the ones where you're kind of struggling already and momentum is kind of leaning, and then I get the short, and then it's like boom. So like this is super aggressive, and I think it's a bit too aggressive for the current case, but I definitely feel like you could trade back down into whatever's there. Maybe not. My point is because I'm trading based on what I think the range is, I want to make sure that the highs and lows of the range are being properly set up. And that's why I definitely do worse in trendy markets, because the whole thing with trendy markets is you need to be way more aggressive or have way more recency in how you're modeling the ranges. So if the market was super aggressive, I might be looking at my range like this. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I can long here because I think we're just going to pump. And then I'll also be quicker to get break even, because if we're going to pump, we should just be super aggressive, right? So the way I'm currently modeling this range, which is like maybe like you know, something like here and the high of this, if we can start to struggle here, is again, completely dependent on what the market is currently doing aggression-wise. So let's see if we can start to get some rounding potentially. I don't really have a reason to be only looking for shorts right now. I just kind of generally have a short bias, so I have to make sure to catch myself on that. The only other reason is because I think if this is our range, we're kind of around the high, so naturally I'm looking for shorts, but maybe we're properly in this and, you know, having sweep this, we are actually going up. I do think this is a bit kind of, doesn't look super bullish. It definitely could be, but I'd kind of be waiting for you to hold over a high decisively before doing that. So let's just see a couple more candles here and see if we can start to get some structure internally that I can reference. At this point, you know, you could be putting in the high of what I was kind of describing before. So you probably at the very least get into this overlap because it's just like the closest thing. I think this is probably already too far gone to just specifically hold there. Because I'm pausing this all the time, it's kind of hard. I don't really have an intuitive gauge for what the intra-candle aggression is, but I think that probably goes. And to be honest, one of these in the low of that probably also goes. Yeah, so you just got that overlap right there. Could be enough. We shall see. At this point, you're struggling here. It kind of really seems to me like you want to trade into this. This is a bit thin for what I would usually do, but I really would not be opposed to doing something like this. It doesn't really feel like I'm trading against like an aggressive move, but you know, if I got this fill before we traded into the, yeah, so I'm not going to take that now because this is literally all I wanted to get into for the break even. But I'm always trying to quote above what I think is going to be the next immediate fair price. And I'm hoping that that's in line with my general bias so that I can actually capture some profit based on exposure. Now we could totally be moving up, you know? Like this could be your range for this. I could see you putting in a low here. You've kind of tested the stuff structurally on the, you know, internal sense that you would like to hold just visually. You've swept this, you've already tested this. This is kind of, you know, this is the high time frame level. You're getting back above this internal overlap. If I saw some internal fluctuation here and I was really inclined to be aggressive, I might take like just a long inside of this, stop here, or maybe slightly lower, maybe something like this, just because I feel like you're probably going to get into something higher immediately. To be honest, I don't really see anything that I would directly expect you to trade into other than like this, but it's too close for this trade to really make any sense. The break even, you'd probably just immediately get break even. But usually I do like to see like a bit more rounding because it feels like the move is actually happening and the momentum is actually starting to turn and you know, would be in my favor. I could definitely see this kind of just going like in two candles like this though. But again, we're right off open. I'm yapping way too much. Let's just see it progress. If I see a trade, I might jump on it. See if we can get some rounding here. We might just slip. I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. So we're holding that. You've got the low of this overlap here. Now it really does feel like we've tested the low of the range. And it does kind of feel like the momentum is back up, at least internally, to maybe get into something like this. So honestly, you could still be slipping here, but this is not... Okay, this is 2 points. I don't want to take 2 fucking point trades. Is this just like a tiny morning? Is this Monday? This is Monday. Just for the sake of the example, I'll you know, take a swing at it. Maybe stop under there. But this is the kind of thing that I wouldn't hate because I feel like in this moment, the momentum's turned around based on you holding this. You're above the high time frame level again. You probably at least get into like this shit before creating the move down. You know what I mean? I could be mid momentum here. The candle just opened. It's only, you know, 19 seconds in. But I don't like that you're testing the high of the daily right there. So momentum could be totally not in my favor here. But I feel like we could get... Okay, I'm cooked. I'm definitely cooked on this. Yeah, so momentum is just down, and that is okay. Let's continue reading. At this point, you're definitely repricing, though. I mean, the range is definitely changing, so I have to be thinking about where I'm at in terms of that. We should probably just let a bit more price play out and try to take some trades and some structure that's is a bit better formed. At this point, I would absolutely be looking at the fact that you're rejecting under this. As it's indicative, I think, of probably, you know, wanting to get into kind of some of these bigger lows. Just to have this right there, I'm going to mark that out. And we'll see if we create some structure internally here. Right now, I'd be seeing, is there some sort of range here that I can quote a premium on there? to get a short into the bigger lows. If we're going to be too aggressive, we're just going to be too aggressive though. And you know, that's part of the game. You know, I'm looking for information wherever I can get it. Really the priority again is figuring out where our range is. Are we gonna form something like this now? Is shit like this premium now because this is the range? To see. Clearly rejected off that. In here you probably get this. I wouldn't hate something like this, to be honest. Okay, you already got it, so it's off the table. I mean, speed is definitely a factor, and FX replay is obviously not a perfect representation of live trading. So we're sweeping that. We'll probably reprice into this overlap here, maybe even the one at the high. Is the range this now? No. So we get into this overlap at the top. Now I am curious. I'm gonna put this down to 1 second so we get real-time speed here. I think we probably get this volume imbalance. I do kind of still generally feel like we're bearish. I want to see the momentum properly be struggling though. We did get this volume imbalance. At this point, again, I'm looking at this kind of as the range. Are we pushing through though, or are we continuing to reject the low? So it looks like we're struggling a bit here. The only problem is I don't know if I want to take a trade directly on this right now because this in my head is the controller. I want to take trades into controllers rather than on them. I do feel like this 1 minute volume balance probably gets tested, and we have been a bit aggressive on this push down. I'd kind of be looking to see if the 15-second was holding underneath this, but let's see a bit more. I want to make sure it's struggling underneath and not just getting above before I'm willing to take a short inside of this. It does kind of look like you're doing that. At this point, I might be interested in shorting. I was going to say shorting under that overlap, but it seems like we're not failing or holding under that external low there. So I'd probably just get rid of this for now. And then this is the highest low in the range here internally. So let's see if we can create some structure here, or if we're just going to return to the high of the range. Just based on how we're treating these highs, these lows, sorry, it does kind of just look like we're going to be bullish. But I'm really, you know, my bias kind of entirely depends on how we're reacting to these. So I shouldn't really say anything until we've gotten a couple candles on them. At this point, I'd have my eyes on probably this. I feel like that gets traded into, this potentially gets traded into. I'd want to make sure that you're actually holding under this. I might look at like, because I want shorts as high in the range as possible, right? I'll just kind of look for whatever's up here. Something inside of that, stop loss there could make sense. I kind of want to see this fuck around a bit more around this overlap and kind of be holding underneath it specifically. We might just go before I get the chance to, yeah, so something into this overlap would have been decent. But now my question is this the range and are we bullish? I don't really feel comfortable doing that under this unless I really think that that needs to get tested into and, you know, I'm getting a free trade into that. That could be the case right now. I generally have a harder time doing that on the long side. I am a bit bearish biased in general here, so I'm probably going to be more inclined to say something like this. If we get above this, I might change my mind for the rest of the day and, you know, be more okay. We haven't seen that much information today yet, so I don't really have an idea of what the current kind of daily tendency is. So for now, I'm going to let this one hang. I do feel like we can test into that, and maybe a long in this overlap just to trade into that would make sense. Time is it? Okay, it's been half an hour. Are we failing on that? Are we holding over it? Okay, we are kind of struggling a bit. I definitely feel like we at least get into this. That is just like the immediate thing there. So in this case, I think I would actually try something like this. You've had your internal sweep. You're failing under the prior low. You've got magnets internally. If this is the range, this is premium. If this is the range, which is more likely, this is premium. And not only is it premium, but you also have the internal fair value reprice thing. So I think my strategy really depends on both of those. You are potentially holding inside of this, and if I'm gauging momentum the wrong way here and you just get right back above that high, you could definitely just kind of smoke me here. Seems my bias might be a bit false today. So at this point, I'm really just watching to see when we trade into this, because I'm going to wait for that to get break even. And it seems like I'm just offside. So we're off to a great start. But this gives the information that we are holding above this here. These ranges are absolutely tiny. This is crazy. 5-point range. Regardless. This is a good example of why, like, you know, obviously this works particularly well when you're properly onside. And when you're actually getting reprices. I think in a general sense here, I'm still bearish. Just the fact that you couldn't really create anything having been above that, I think is kind of indicative of the fact that you're probably going to just continue to go down. You're under this. You swept stuff internally and then started to push down. This isn't the best day to do this because it's kind of like just like a shitty Monday, but I don't really think it's the worst either. So you're holding under this low again, which is definitely something I'm considering because I'm looking to see where is the range, where can I get short. I'm pretty much just bearish, so this probably gets traded back into. Now that you're coming back up, I want to see if you are struggling. I think at this point, I would not be opposed to something like this. I want to be short as high as possible that I think you can still get, you know, within the natural fluctuation of this. And I want to see you into that overlap at the low there. So my break even, you just tested the high of that. In live, I might wait like a little bit longer. Like I might wait to see if you're into the low or like properly into it, you know, not just like sniping it. But this is kind of the framework. It's not really, you know, this like, oh, I'm up 0.50 or I have to immediately go break even. A lot of the time it's that, but I will gauge my break even speed based on whether or not we've actually tested the thing that I'm targeting internally. And I think the good trades will always get into the thing that I'm targeting internally because that's where true signal is. You're actually repricing to fair value. There's actually a reason to have that understanding or that belief or whatever. So it makes sense to only go break even when you get that, right? And I think generally that's given pretty, you know, freely if the trade quality is good. So again, right now I'm kind of modeling this as the potential high, just internally you're getting this. I want to take a trade at the high of this range to get into the low, or not even, I just want to take a trade at the high of the range because it's cheap. It's a cheap entry. And I think we're also going to get this reprice. So, and then also generally, I think we're kind of bearish. So I also think it's premium in terms of kind of like our bigger shit. I do kind of just think we probably get into this 1 minute volatile because you kind of don't really leave those, and I have a tinge of bearishness in my mouth. Pause. So we'll see what happens here. I'm probably going to be pretty aggressive in my trailing today just because, shit has been like pretty choppy. But again, I do kind of feel like that volume bell wants to go. So maybe just literally this overlap is all it needed. And you're just going to fluctuate in this range given the chop. That's all right with me. You are trying to hold that. Usually I don't really trail before like 2R in profit. That was only 1.5, so I don't really... I want to play the exposure here. I think it makes sense. If you're just sweeping under this, minor low here, then it's okay. I'm happy to just like get fucked on that, whatever. I kind of only care about the exposure in a case like this. If I was up like 1.5 and shit was liquid and it was clearly turning around on me, I'd probably take it. But at this point, I probably would be trailed because I'd be expecting you to hold under this low. I don't want to be too aggressive with it. But at the same time, I'm not really willing to give all this back. To be honest, I'm going to cheat a bit and go on the 15 second. Because I think in live that is something I'd be using. So you just rejected that. I don't really want you to fail that. So now that you've clearly rejected the kind of overlap that I think is the interior controller, I probably would just trail to the side, to be totally honest. I do still think we get the 1 minute volume balance, though. I think that's very fair. I only really want to participate if this is going with aggression, though. So if I get trailed out there, that's more than fine. That was 1.2. Okay, yeah. Obviously not, a brilliant trade, but yeah, and we get the world's most trash trade a lot. But it's always it's a probabilistic endeavor. But I do feel like that fallen bell probably goes. There you go. We probably go further though, to be honest. I feel like I still kind of feel like the onus is on this to get into these bigger lows, or at least I feel like that's generally likely. I don't know for sure. I'm still only going to kind of try to take entries based on what I think is premium or cheap, whatever word you want to use. I think the general thing is that there are trades that are going to be super full of signal for this kind of strategy, and there are trades where you're going to kind of be trying to rationalize it to yourself. I definitely think the ones I took before that were like 1 point stops or something in this like kind of shitty ass day, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's obviously not the most beautiful case. So I think the onus is on me a little bit to try to better specifically look for the freest, most gorgeous kind of shit. I think FX Replay is a good opportunity to do that, considering I can just fast forward until I see something pretty. So I'll try to do that here, for myself to validate that this is actually, a good approach, and also just to give some good examples of what looks good. At this point, let me chill out. No, I was going to say, I feel like, actually I was going to say you probably get back into that, so you could probably trade back into that, but I don't know. You've had a bit of a sweep here. I'm entertaining the idea that maybe that's your range. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'd probably want to see a bit more structure. On a day that's more liquid, it's obviously going to be much easier to make inference from, at least because I'm doing this, visually for the most part. So you test back into that. Now that kind of looks like a low a little bit. I don't know. Do you want to get into this level? I'm still kind of considering that as the bigger controller. But if you are kind of sweeping this, then you could slip. I don't know. I need to see a bit more structure. What does that look like? It's kind of bearish, bro. IDK. I feel like this gets tested. I feel like you also just left that low untested. I feel like that doesn't really happen. It's kind of gross. I feel like that overlap gets tested. And I want to kind of see you failing here. I want to kind of see it fucking around. If it doesn't, That's okay. I obviously won't go to take a trade. You know, the more sweeps, the better, really. If this wants to sweep this again and round out there, that's cool with that. Okay. Now I'm getting some ideas. If we do that, I'm looking for shorts for sure. If we don't do that, then, you know, I'm gonna chill out and try to still get a good read for things. I still think this goes, so I'm just gonna leave that marked. I might mark out this because that could be useful for taking entries that are somewhat premium to this. Are we holding under that? I think just because this is what's here, we probably get back into this, to be honest. Are we holding under that prior low? Or are we not? Looks like we're just holding above. Okay. You got that high there, so I want to see if you're holding above that. If you are, I'll get on side with the bullishness. It does feel like this probably gets tested. That is kind of just like an untested overlap at the high of the range. So I'm going to clear this up a bit and see if that goes or not. At this point, I'm potentially thinking about this as this being the range now. So are longs there valid? I don't know. Are you holding above the high? That's kind of how I'm gauging here. Is it the range or is it not the range? Looks like it might not be the range. Okay. At this point, honestly, I wouldn't hate something like this just because I feel like the momentum is in favor of the longs a bit. Again, 2.5 stop, shitty choppy day. Don't know. I'm going to give myself an out. Fuck you. No, I'm just playing. But obviously I'm standing on the trades I'm taking here. But I mean, I don't love this as much just because you have this here, and usually, you know, something like this, I'd be looking just, you know, to get into that for the break even. But I do kind of feel like the momentum is starting to turn up a bit, and we probably get this. We also missed the bigger high time frame level there, and you're clearly not failing under that, at least not right now. So I wouldn't hate this. So we got filled there. It didn't really show because we're skipping a couple seconds at a time, but you can see 44 USD, so I am filled. If we trade back into this, I'm obviously going to go break even. Yep, so that's, I do deem that to be kind of the controller locally. So see if we can get a push into this, which I feel like is the thing that's, you know, the fair value that's going to get repriced to. There you go. Even though that I think this can totally turn the range around, I do feel like we've got more range to break into here. This volume balance here, for example, you probably get that. So I'm going to watch how that responds, but I'm probably not going to trail anything unless we get an actual move out of any of this. If it gets me break even, that's fine. I do feel like we can probably get into that daily that's right there, the bigger purple box. Yep. And potentially through it. Yeah, so at this point, I'm probably going to start to look for trails because this is like 2.5 hour. That is the overlap though. So, you know, I'll probably just, even though I feel like this is the thing that's going to hold the move up and kind of be where the noise internally kind of spikes around, I'm not really willing to walk back too much of this. So if it wants to go with aggression and, you know, kind of restructure the range of the day, then be my guest. But you know, I'm going to lock something up here just because it'd be kind of crazy not to. So like I said, that's where that holds. You're getting through a little bit right now. I don't want to make this too messy, but I would be looking at this 1 minute volume balance just because that's what's there. Delete the daily for like 2 seconds and just see what happens here. Once you do that, I mean, there's still room for this to fluctuate and do that while still holding. That's also the daily. I think I'm trailing probably to at least like there. I'd probably look at the 15 second. How much structure is this? That's one candle. I'm going to let this chill for 2 seconds. If it holds up there for a bit longer, I would trail that. Oh, you can't undo that? Okay. Yeah, so that's what I'd be looking at. I'm going to delete the volume imbalance for now. But that is there, and I feel like that is, just like this, you know, kind of a local controller. or at least a local magnet for price. I definitely think this can, like, even if it's going to pump, tag back down into this again. That's why I'm not going to trail this immediately. Okay, at this point, I'm going to trail this. What are the local things we get into? Probably something like this, to be honest, because that did not get tested back into. And I just feel like, again, these are magnets. It's not studied. I don't approve. This is just kind of like the way I'm cutting things up and making reference. I don't like that little spike up, but that looks good. Honestly, I probably just want to get aggressive on this, considering you could break out into a new range, but this is kind of the broader range, you know? So like, yeah, fuck, why not, bro? Like, just let me lock some shit up. This is 3.5, so why not? There's going to be more trades. I do feel like we probably get into that overlap at least. Might trail me out before that, though. Let me just mark this so I know where this is when this disappears. Yeah, so we got trailed out there. And, you know, maybe it was suboptimal. Who knows? There you go. So you get the thing. And it ends up putting in a little interim high there. And then you get back into the daily. So that's 3.5. Currently, we are up 1.2, 3.5, 4.7, minus 2, so 2.7. And that's even with some shit that's a bit retarded. Right now, I would kind of be looking at this. Maybe you can snag along in there. Do I think we have something to reprice to internally? We kind of already tested this. So to be honest, I'd probably be waiting for a bit more structure. It does look like we're getting a bit more aggressive. So something like this in a market where I was really eager to be bullish, I think would be appropriate. But right now I'm going to maybe wait until we get a couple more candles, because I don't really have a fair value to reprice to. Oh, fuck, hold on. This I don't dislike, though, because it does feel like the momentum is rounding a bit. Since we're a bit lower in the range, though, I might try to snag something even greedier, because I'm always trying to get an entry that's as premium as physically possible. Am I getting a bit lost in the sauce here? Potentially. Like I said, the best trades occur when you have a premium and you also have an expected reprice. Here, there's no real overlap. I don't really have a magnet other than what's already been tested, so I don't really know that there is. I still kind of don't hate this, though, because it feels like... yeah, okay, I missed the long. That's cool, though. But yeah, still, you know, premium right here. Boom. But alas. That looks a bit cleaner for shorts, even. It is a choppy Monday. You expect mean reversion. Makes sense. You got a little bit of an interim high here. You swept the internal stuff. I'd like to see a bit more structure. I don't really have anything that I think you need to reprice to internally, but I'm starting to potentially think about shorts, obviously, because this is the range. You're near the high. You know what I mean? You're sweeping. I don't know. Let's see some candles. Okay, you're getting through the high. Potentially sweeping on the bigger one. I'm probably going to delete this now. Whoa. Delete this now, just because I feel like the controllers are more so the local stuff, particularly this and this, but I'm going to leave that one blank. Okay. You reswept the prior candle here, potentially subjugating whatever momentum is going on that's aggressively pushing you up. This might be a function of my short bias, but to be honest, this, just to get you into the prior high that you probably need to hold over to actually create a move up, if not literally just this overlap right here, if not the volume imbalance that got left open, is not the worst thing in the world. I do not love the momentum that I'm counter trading right here, because to be honest, if you do want to be aggressive, the local thing that is fair price is probably literally just this overlap that just got created. But given the sweep, the external sweep, and this right here, this and this, I don't feel like this is completely awful. Again, it would depend on my bias on ES. It would depend on the kind of intracandle momentum on the 1 minute. Ooh, that doesn't look so but we'll see, right? Like legit, bro. Fair value. It's not, my entry's not super premium. Could have gotten this, maybe a bit less likely to get break even once I get it. I'm going break even right off that, bro. You get into that. I feel like even if this is super aggressively bullish right now, I just feel like you get the little micro market making reprice into the thing that is non-noisy or less noisy than the internal movement. So obviously this was risky for the reasons we explained, but you know, and I'm probably gonna get break even. So maybe it's just bad for that reason on its own. You get the volume imbalance there. I think that makes sense. Could you hold the move up here? Totally. If we put in a high here, is this the fucking high of the total fucking range here on a Monday that you'd expect to revert back to its range? Yes. So, you know, you got shit going both ways. You might just want to wait for a bit more structure to take a trade like this. But at this point, again, I'm usually just playing for exposure. I'm not really going to... Sometimes I might lock up one on this, but, you know, for the sake of the example here, I'm not going to do it. And I get exactly sniped break even because overlaps are magnets for price. So... that's more than okay, but there's the case in point, right? When you're wrong, you're break even for the most part if you do it right. And when you are right, you get to play the exposure. This is just kind of like a choppy day, so you would anticipate shit like that. This could totally just be moving up here. We should just kind of zoom out a bit and see some structure. Obviously, you can be as granular with this as you want, but ideally, you want to take the shit with the best signal, the shit that has everything, right? And there's a lot of ways to look at this, so there's going to be a lot of trades. But I think it's very straightforward. It's very rigid. You have a very simple, clean framework for the way that you're making decisions. It's more so just like the discretionary part is kind of isolated and kind of neatly confined to how you're modeling the ranges themselves, like whether or not this is the range or this is the range, right? Depending on how you're reading price, which is obviously what it comes down to. Let me think here though. You are kind of holding against that failing, not holding above this. You're also not holding above this. You are kind of holding this though, which can kind of just be the thing at the low of the range that enables you to get above this, you know, in a couple candles. So it's hard to say whether or not all this is noise or signal, in terms of whether or not this is actually sweeping, or if the fact that we're just under it for a little bit is just kind of noise. Natural variation. I don't think I'd be willing to take anything in here because everything's too close together. The only thing I would be willing to take is a long. I think shorts here kind of don't really make that much sense, just because the only thing you reprice into is so close that you're going to get break even naturally just due to the variance anyways, or the internal variability. This does kind of look like it wants to go up though, TBH. TBH, you're kind of like struggling to break down a bit, although holding above the high there. Stop clicking, sorry. Let's see. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, next highs. Let's lock in really quick. Probably get this at the very least. Held above both of these on the 1 minute. Might mark this out just for fun and see what we do here. This is an example where maybe we're getting aggressive and maybe I want to model the current range as this, you know, or really this actually, if I think we're going to reprice into something like this overlap or this volume imbalance. So let me just mark this. Yeah, so that's what we tested into there. Is this the range? Are we getting really aggressive, or are we turning around here? I don't know. Let's see. To be honest, because you're holding aggressively above this and we've kind of shown that we want to get a bit more aggressive, I think we could potentially reprice into this new high and be creating a run for the day. So this, the only thing I don't like about this is that kind of the magnet on the left that I would use most immediately is this, which you're kind of on right now. So this might even be a good example of me getting too eager and taking an entry that doesn't make as much sense based on the kind of whole fair value argument. Because we're at fair value, not before it. We do just have momentum though, and bias saves me in this case, which you will see happens a lot. And that's kind of the beauty of this as well, is that I think the entry model and the whole idea of premium versus fair value and the kind of pure market making sense, market informed sense, like why should you expect a trade to have edge in a purely casino math kind of sense? There is also qualitative edge in reading price, right? And also there's just randomness. I could just be getting lucky right there and, you know, it's just bullshit or whatever. But I think there is qualitative edge does exist. I think being able to read the markets based on patterns does exist. Your brain can probably absorb or make sense of the way the market typically moves, because there are going to be patterns in markets dictated by the small set of optimal actions that are repeatedly done by the highly technical market participants that are dictating price, right? So or coming together in aggregate to dictate price, unintentionally, but still doing it because they're the ones moving all the size. So I do feel like I had a read on this, and I might not have had the perfect kind of fair value argument in the entry, but bias plays. And, I think maybe this whole argument of this is the low of the range, and now we're repricing here. And so this is, decently premium. Does make sense. Also, you could just make the argument that this is the high overlap of the range that is kind of just like the magnet or all this other shit. And so you hadn't tested that yet, and it's just fair value to reprice into that. You don't want to get too hand wavy with it though, but I'm not going to waste any more time on this trade one. So yeah, I mean, do we get that high? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. It's a game of exposure. We don't, not before it gets me break even. So again, overlaps are the magnets. That happened to test in my entry. That's, I guess, the one downside, but that's okay. I'd like to see some more structure here. I don't really kind of know what I'm looking at. I think generally it is Monday, so I'm kind of just expecting this to fuck around and do kind of whatever it wants. But because I'm a bit bullish in general, I'd probably just be waiting to see if this is going to do this and hold something in there potentially. And if it doesn't, then and starts actually sweeping, I wouldn't really call this much of a sweep. Then we can maybe get on the short side, but for now, we shall see. I think the other thing is that, like I was saying at the start of the video, I'm generally only like getting long when we're like above highs and we're still kind of in the process of like creating the bullishness. And I only really want to get short when we're sweeping and potentially switching into the bearishness or into whatever the opposite is. If we're going down and then we're starting to sweep and really roll over and round out, then I'll start looking for longs. Or if we're clearly in the middle of holding over highs, then I'll look for longs. But in this mid-range shit, unless there's like some obvious reprice thing argument that I can make, I'm not really going to like rush to take shorts here because we're still kind of in the process of holding above this high. We're not really sweeping this. We're not really rounding out. I don't know if all the stuff between this is just noise. So I'm still trying to cut it up and isolate it to what I think the controllers are and where I think fair value currently lies, which I don't really have an assessment of right now. Which makes sense because the market's intention, the whole point of the market is to trade at fair value. And the whole thing that we're capitalizing off of are inefficiencies. The idea there is that you're getting paid as a trader. You're being rewarded, remunerated for your services, which is trading price into its fair price, thereby fixing that inefficiency. So the whole idea is most of the time there isn't going to be a trade because the whole purpose of the market is for there not to be a trade, for the market to be in its equilibrium or at its fair value. So it's natural that you might have to wait, and there's only going to be a couple trades a day because there's only going to be a mispricing that's obvious to you, at least in terms of how you're conceptualizing a mispricing, every now and again, which I think is very important to internalize. I'm still, again, vaguely bullish because you didn't really sweep this, but as we start to round out here, I might change my mind. Fire. Love to see it. Are we sweeping? Do we need to hold this? I think there is a case to be made for that. I think honestly, just based on the fact that you are fucking around here, tried to push up right here, and are kind of falling down, you probably get this volume balance. There's a world where I would take a short here just to get into the volume balance to then potentially trade into this level right here because I think all three of those are controllers. But I would probably, to be honest, in the ideal sense, wait for like a bit more structure up here, internal sweeps, whatnot. And besides, you're super close to this, so I'd probably just wait like 2 more seconds. There's the volume imbalance. Do you get all the way into the prior high? Nope. So the problem here is that I'm offside. I should be looking for longs in a range like this. I mean, you did just sweep that actually, so let me just chill out. Let me chill out for a second. It's not that bad. Again, like I was just explaining, there's not always going to be an apparent edge. You could be rounding out a bit here, to be honest. You could very much be doing that. Honestly, I don't really think, unless you just get right back above this high, I don't think anything inside of this is capable of holding the move up. You probably do at least get this volume imbalance. And considering that you have an overlap between these two candles, I might, actually like this. I know I was just explaining how you want to be long in a situation like this, but this is kind of the rounding out phenomenon I was talking about. And I do feel like I have this fair price argument. This can definitely hold off of this and just get right back above this high, but I don't feel like this is awful. So I'm going to take a shot at this again for the reason that I believe that this is current fair value. We could quickly reprice into that before continuing the move up. If we do, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. Otherwise, I wouldn't really want to be short if I thought this was going to continue to be aggressively bullish. We probably do get these highs, to be honest, later in the day. This isn't super gorgeous, but I do feel like you might want to hold over this. Although the case for this might be a bit weaker. We did not get filled before doing that. You see it still says sell limit. So it did happen, but again, sometimes it's good prices are competitive prices. Other people want free trades too. So market makers specifically, assuming they're modeling things similarly, which they're probably not, but regardless. Edges like this tend to be correlated with each other. So honestly, there's a good chance they might actually be on the trades that you end up being right. So like I said, good prices are competitive prices. It's going to be natural that if you're trying to limit premium above shit, you're going to miss trades. So does this get all the way back into this? That'd be kind of cool if it does. I don't know. Or is this the range now? I don't know. I do think we probably trade back into this, to be honest, actually. So if we swept the bottom, I might start looking for longs internally. Are we going to slip this blue line though, or are we going to hold it? I do feel like we probably get it, so I'm going to be patient. I'm kind of thinking about longs right now. If we continue doing this, if we hold this, get back above this, then I feel like we can probably get back into this and continue the uptrend. And then this is the range. So then this is pretty premium relative to this range. So let's see. Do we get back above or am I totally offside? Okay, that's different. Again, I want to see us kind of holding above that if we're going to do that. And we are completely just slipping. Looks like my short earlier would have been pretty solid, actually. Are we trying to sweep that? What are we doing? I want to see a range form, at least internally. Okay, hold on. Trying to hold above this. You got those that you're testing back into. I don't really like the low is right there. It's not really on anything. I mean, I guess you got that right there. I feel like you reprice into something. Let's see like one more candle push down. I kind of want to get long like in here, but I don't know how I feel about it considering you got this low. I guess that's okay actually because that's right on that. I want to see like the next candle push into this, get back above, then I long that, then it goes like that. I don't know that that's going to happen. That is kind of what I would like most in this scenario, just so I don't know that you're holding this and then just continuing to slip. You're not really holding on anything concretely here. So I'd like to see a bit more range internally. It might result in me missing the trade. That's totally fine. It's not exactly the same trade now that you've pushed up all the way there, but if we pushed down and did what I said, I'd still be cool with it. Okay, it's just not the trade anymore. But I think the bullish idea is potentially still in play here. Where is the range? So I'm kind of modeling the range as like this now. So I kind of don't really want to jump in on anything super internal just yet until I think I can change that idea for what the range is. No real overlaps to kind of go off of. back into that high right there. Are we just coming down? Are we just continuing the bearishness? Should I be quoting the high of the range here? It does kind of make sense for us to get a bit lower potentially, but maybe I was just too slow on that. I don't know. I don't really love anything internal here just yet though. So I'm going to go off that instinct. Sweeping potentially a little bit inside there. Probably get into that overlap at the high, yeah. Holding down off it, or what are we doing? Kind of struggling on both sides. Okay, that's an interesting thing to hold. It is. Kind of looks weak though. I need to see this rounding out on the bottom. Potentially resweeping. Okay. Is there something we need to trade into on top? Not really. The fair price argument is kind of weak here. And I think we could slip, but I'm tempted for something like this. But I think I need to see more structure because I don't have anything internally that I really think you need to trade into. I honestly think that this could still be in the process of doing something like this. And you don't really, this isn't really much of a range. It would be if we were at like 935 and like price was going crazy aggressive, but right in here, I'd like to see a bit more shit because you can just do that. Are we getting below that too? Am I offside here? I mean, there wasn't really a trade that's not super aggressive inside of that other than maybe like a short right there, stop like up here or something. I don't know. At least according to how I am doing things. Okay, can we get back above this high? Where's fair value? What am I doing here? Let's see. Okay, you just go in one candle, sure. Sure, bro. Okay, I would be curious. I'd be interested in longs here. If you can maybe tag into this and create an internal low off that. Or just go. Okay, sure. Just holding above. Okay. Okay. Okay, you're probably just continuing the uptrend. But I'd like to see more structure. I think this is a bit small to be the current range here. Absolutely could be. I don't really just have a reason to be that aggressive. Today has not been aggressive like that, so it's very possible, but I'd like to see maybe a bigger low get put in, just like something like this, so that I can quote around the low. That might be enough. It's not. I'd like the blue line to be tested. I'd like the prior high to be tested. I feel like that's kind of your bigger controller here. That volume imbalance can totally do it, but it's just not. It's too aggro for me in this condition. I don't really see a case for rounding out to the downside just because we're still above the prior high. If we got under it, then maybe. Yeah, so this is kind of what I just marked out, right? This becomes your range, and then you're safe to quote down here. I just didn't want to because I figured maybe you get this, a final sweep before going. But we'll just have to continue to see what goes on here. Yeah, so that, shit in here, overlaps in here, the high of that volume bell, maybe it would have been decent. But so we're up 2.7 right now. And we're just launching. Let me just, I'll keep it. Got this side right here. I'd like to see you at least holding above that on the 15 second. And you probably just get into the next ones. So generally speaking, I'm bullish unless we're failing this specifically. Then I'll wait to see if we're holding above some other shit. Or again, look for some sort of fair value reprice trade. Gives me a free break even. Probably get this volume imbalance. Are we going to hold above the blue line though, or no? Or no? Interesting. I'd like to see this sweep. If we can sweep and hold above this, I wouldn't hate longs on something like this. Are we going to get that, or is it going to slip? This looks pretty tough. Okay. Okay. Let me put this back just to see if we snipe it or not. At this point, though, I mean, this I'd be looking at. This. I want to leave that, though, because I feel like that might go. I just like to see some structure. I feel like I don't want to be aggressively short on a day that hasn't been very aggressive. I'd like to see something get formed inside of this. I guess that has an implicit kind of short connotation to it. I'm going to mark this a bit bigger here because I just want to see if you're rejecting under this specifically. Are you? This kind of feels like, this kind of does feel like you're doing something like this right now. But this is kind of where the fair value of the range is. So I'm kind of getting on fair value. You can definitely get back into this. You can definitely get into this. Internally though, do I need another sweep? You're holding there, you're holding here. I kind of want something like this, to be honest. I feel like that was you trying to push up and you're rounding. There's no fair value argument, but I think there's a bias argument. So it's a bit weaker of a trade, but I'm gonna give it a shot. Filled. It's tough to manage the break even on something like this. Can you get the low of this? I feel like I can wait for you to get the low of that before I get break even. There's the low. Yeah, I feel like I'm obliged to. I gotta do it there. Okay. We are in. We're so in. Am I bearish in general here? Let me clean this up. You've had a bigger sweep there. You are failing under this, which is, I think, is more important than even the fact that you're failing under this. So I'm actually just gonna mark that. And you've got lows on bottom. I think we could definitely round out and go for highs, but TBH, I think the bear case makes sense. This overlaps completely untested as well. So it is purely exposure. What I'm trying to say is I'm not going to trail super aggressive. It has been a shitty Monday, so I'm going to trail in general as it gives it to me. But I do think we can slip into, yep, okay, there's that overlap I was talking about. That's 2.5. This I have to be careful of. It is a shitty Monday. I'm tempted to literally just fuck off and lock that up. Let me think, 2.29 compared to what could be 3.86. The risk-adjusted return, assuming that it's super risky not to trail right now, does not really make sense just to get into that. I do feel like we could get lower. There's definitely a much smaller probability of that though. So I feel like rationally speaking, it makes sense for me to lock this shit up just because I feel like this is the kind of thing that can totally just create a wick here, fuck around and like leave me with one or something. I'm going to opt to be a little bit irrational here just because I feel like this can go. But I definitely feel like the risk adjusted return, I mean, the probabilities will change as we get more information here. But I don't know how much sense it makes to not lock up right here, given that I'm not getting that much for the amount that I'm potentially giving back. I like that though. The probability of this thing continuing to slip after that does go up quite a bit. Or, I mean, at least compared to where we were. So I'm going to trail just to that because it's a Monday. It could be turning around. And if this wants to go, it'll probably go off that. I'm also just, just plain and simple. It's a risk adjusted return thing. I just want to take some off because I'm not really playing for that much more. And then there is the tail probability of this thing actually slipping much further. So here, you've kind of got something this closed here, this opened here, something like this. You could be holding right there. I'm honestly going to just trail this to that low. And if it wants to go with aggression because you're so close to that next overlap, you are more than free to NQ. That's 2.86 locked. There you go. I am going to be aggressive with this. Either it slips or it does not. This is 3.57. Trailed me out right there for 3.57. Usually, if this was a super nice day, I would just let this kind of expand and trail on the 1 minute or the 15-second or as momentum dictates. This has been a fucking awful Monday, so I'm locking that shit up. We'll see if that was the right move or not. But so that's another 3.7, 2.7 plus, I think we rounded down earlier, so we probably have some wiggle room to round up a bit. So we'll just call this 3.6. That is fucking 6.3, 6.3 on the day. Let's keep going. I mean, there's no reason to not, you know what I mean, keep applying the concepts. There's going to be trades everywhere that you're just going to be like, you took a good trade. There's some mental heuristic there where you're like, hey, it's like, let me wait 5 minutes before I take another trade. I don't know. We'll see. I think if there's signal, there's signal. So let's continue acting on it. I know this is getting to be a long video, but I think a lot of, in essence, the attitudes or the beliefs I have that apply to live discretionary NQ scalping are well encapsulated in everything I'm saying here. Although it'd be fun to get a more perfect example of something that includes fair value repricing, the premium entry into that, bias, reading, everything. Considering this trade didn't really have that fair value repricing, at least not internally. Usually I have like two of them, right? You have the more external one that you think makes sense, that informs your bias. You have the internal one that really guarantees you the free break even. This was more kind of an in-the-moment reading of price. Tough trail, it would appear. But I do kind of have just a simple heuristic for that because I think you need to simplify things where you can. If it's a choppy day, I'm locking it up where I can. If it is an expansive day, I'll give it an appropriate amount of space. So let's see if maybe we can find one more trade. It's a little bit for vanity though. I think the things I want to communicate here have been well communicated. I think I want to start recording my sessions from now on for a personal accountability thing, and then also so that I'm keeping the focus. I think talking out loud while you're trading, at least for me, has been super useful for keeping that continuous train of thought. I would definitely recommend. Let's see for now. We're holding on the daily here. I think potentially we might be holding under this low. So if we do that, I'm going to be biased bearishly. If we're not, then we'll have to see what's going on here. Could definitely put in a low here. So you are holding above this high, failing to break under it. You did not retest that low, but to be honest, you don't really need to. It would be nice in terms of like forming out a clean range here, but you did kind of fall kind of far. I think it would make sense to potentially trade into that to see if you can get held down. What's the 15-second doing here? You're kind of just holding above. You've kind of got momentum up a little bit. Can we get above the overlaps inside of this properly? I think right inside of there, I wouldn't hate something like this, to be honest. Because I feel like it does make sense to like reprice into like that at least. And you are holding above this high. That's kind of the important part. Is that this is clearly showing that you want to pop. We did actually get filled on it. We did get filled on that. So at this point, I would go just break even here. It's hard to see with the FX replay thing, but because we're skipping up 5 seconds at a time, there's going to be price action that's not included in here, but I would assume we got filled in this candle, or maybe even in this next candle there. So I know the argument here is that if this is the range, is this super premium? I guess it's more so modeling like what could become of the range. I think we're holding above here, and so reading price has something to do with that. You know, you've got this right here, you've got shit in here that I think it makes sense to trade into. You kind of had a bigger sweep. You held this daily that's down here. I think where you're likely to form out your range is more so something like this, and then I just have the internal bullish bias, right? So it's not, again, it's not super premium in the sense that you have the internal mispricing that you feel like you're going to trade into, that you're internally getting it into. You're not really going to get that as much on days that are illiquid like this, but I feel like there is reasoning for shit like this and this low. If you're going to specifically apply what I'm showing here, you need to think about things in terms of controllers like I've shown. But the kind of what you're going to consider a controller and what you're going to consider the current range or fair value is mostly dependent on your ability to read price and what you've witnessed in the past and kind of what makes sense to you. I think more so what I'm trying to communicate here is the principle of you want to be buying something cheaply, you want to be selling something cheaply, or I guess expensively maybe, I don't know. Yeah. It's basically buy low, sell high. But I think it's a useful framework to think about the market in terms of and a necessary one at that, because you want to be interacting. This thing that you're interacting with has some fundamental truths about it and have participants that are thinking in certain ways. And I think it's a useful conceptualization, you know? So I'll trail this one to completion, and then I think we can call it. Again, I do think this is like easily potentially the extent of this internal move, but I'm not really going to trail anything that's less than like 1.5 to 2R, so I'm going to play this for the exposure a little bit. It does make sense for this low to be a place where we can start to create potentially a move down, which is why I took the trade in the first place. I think that's something that would like to get tested internally. So yeah, same goes for this low. I think it makes total sense to trade into that. And I think that you could probably form a range inside of that. I do want to play the exposure, but I feel like this is kind of where you could get some range-bound price action. So I might trail under this overlap that's just here, because I feel like that could actually hold up a bit. And then this trail is 1.08. So I could see this getting trailed out, pretty easily. I like that though. I think now that you have that, I would just be kind of deferring to this higher overlap to be the thing that holds, for really just my own mental convenience here, because I do just want to lock some of this move up. I do think obviously, there's a tail probability that you just continue pushing, and so I want to have some exposure for that. I don't really know that this is going to turn around. If I was up more R on this trade, I'd probably be more aggressive on this, but just because this is kind of small, I'm not really going to go too crazy. Holding up and over that, clean. Do I have anything that I think, overlaps that can be magnets for price in here? You kind of have that. Kind of want to see how you're interacting around this high. So let's just keep watching. I do think this volume balance wants to get traded into, to be honest. So I'm probably just going to lock this up just because, I don't need to sit in this. That's 2. Maybe we can get the 3 if this extends into that. It does. Honestly, I'm just going to push up on this pretty aggressively here. I might just do something like that. If we go straight through it, then maybe we can just expand. Maybe because we're mid expansion right now, we can expand straight into this prior high or that volume balance. If it wants to push down before it does that, that's very okay with me. There we go. We got trailed out for 2.42 there. I'll round that down to 2.4. That puts us at 6.3 plus 2.4. That's 8.7. So 8.7 on a terrible Monday session, with, some clean reasoning, some free break evens, and a good concept of what premium and fair value is. So yeah, hopefully you guys got some value out of that.